This program is about my life, how I become an artist. My name is Kustova Anastasia. I'm a watercolor artist, and I was born in Kaluga. It's about 180 kilometers south of Moscow. For the first 27 years, I lived in Kaluga, and the last 3 years, I live in Moscow. I'm 30 years old, so first 27 years, I lived in Kaluga, last 3 years in Moscow. Few years before I moved to Moscow, I was driving for master classes to, from Kaluga, and finally moved to Moscow. This is a story how I started painting and became an artist. First of all, I want to say huge thanks to my mom. I hope she is listening. Because she never kind of was in a way of what things that I wanted to do, even though sometimes she considered them really strange. She always supported. I started drawing very early. There is a drawing when I was 3 years, 10 months old. Mom would attach drawing to the corner of the big sheet of paper, and I would draw, but I wouldn't just copy. For example, if it was a clown, I would put a clown and then dogs jumping around. So I always used my imagination and creativity. I always knew that I'm an artist, but I was never planning it as my career, and I'll explain why. There was a question here if I ever went to art school. I never went to art school, and let me tell my story so it's all going to be explained. Okay, I'm going to start my story. When I was 6 years old, musical school came to our kindergarten and introduced us to a variety of musical instruments. And I fell in love with Domra. When my grandmother came to pick me up from kindergarten and brought me home, I told my mom that on Monday she's taking me to music school. Because I'm going to learn to play on Domra. And my mom was completely shocked. She said, I was planning to take you to dance classes. But, well, she took me to musical school. My mom didn't even have an idea what Domra is. Here I'm showing you what is Domra. It's my love. And for 16 years, I played, learned, and traveled with orchestra. And I even have, together with an orchestra, 4 Grand Prix awards. So it was a big part of my life. So since it was a musical school, it was all very serious, 5 days a week. And we had theory of music and orchestra and choir and piano. So it was taking lots of, most of my time. My mom still took me to dance lessons, and I studied classical dance and for about a year. And still, it's always, all of it is very useful, and I still can do something, I guess. So knowledge how to dance was very useful in university, and somebody asked if I sing. Yes, I sing too. So I was studying music and in orchestra from 6-year-old till I was 22. So I'll explain why I left. When I was in school, I was participating in plays and theater, and it's all, was and is very useful in my life. When the time came to apply to colleges, since I was a very good student, I didn't have a medal, but I had almost perfect score. So at some point I was thinking that maybe I want to apply for design degree, but at that time art colleges required diploma from art school, which I didn't have. Since I'm telling you all my secrets, so I did actually apply to art school and was accepted in Kaluga. It was about 9 to 10 person per spot. But 3 days later, I took my papers and left because I was already drawing by that time. And to draw still lifes and compositions in certain style with certain technique, it was really boring for me. I'm not saying if it's right or wrong. It wasn't right for me. Just overall, to explain who I am. I'm self-starter and self-learner, and that's the most efficient way for me to learn. Someone's asking if I were gonna play something. I haven't played for a while, so let's leave music to history.
Уже техника не та.
So let's get back to higher education. So when it was time to apply, I pretty much was accepted to every university that I applied to. It was a choice between Bauman University, and I was accepted to finance and credit department, and even got a scholarship. But I really wanted to go to engineering department in Bauman, and I took my papers from finance and credit, and was waiting for results from Bauman University, taking my chances, but it's what I wanted to do. In Bauman University for engineering department, there was a pretty stiff competition, lots of people to one spot, but they were releasing results in several days. So I took my chance, and I was even looking for a job because I thought maybe if I don't get in, I need to work and apply next year. But I got in. Somebody asked if I ever wanted to quit music. Of course, there was time when I wanted to quit music because, I was a child. I was sitting at home practicing, and I saw all those kids playing outside, and, I wanted to be like everyone else. I wanted to play. But I did not quit, and the reason I didn't quit, I guess it's kind of defines my personality and who I am. Because I went to my mom and I told her that I want to quit. And she said that, you chose it. I didn't force you. I didn't push you. It was your decision. And if you want to quit, you can quit, but you are responsible for this. And what I was expecting is for her to say, oh, yeah, poor girl, yes, of course you can quit. And I wanted to kind of move the responsibility to my mom, but she didn't let me do it. And that's kind of defined my personality for later in life. And, the decision gave me strength to stick with it. And then when I started traveling with an orchestra and performing in big concert halls, I went to Finland and around Russia. And of course, it was a sort of different world, different experience. I enjoyed it. I played with very famous people on stage, and it created this very, creative environment. So back to university. So I was accepted into Bauman University, and I studied there for 6 years. And my major was instrumental system of machine production and tools and systems of, I guess, mechanical production. That would be more correct. So it seems like I lived several lives already by now, and I'm planning on more. So in Bauman University, my specialty was tool systems of mechanical production. My narrow specialty was gears. So after 6 years, I graduated, and I worked on military production, and I worked first as a constructor, and then technologist, and then like a lead specialist. There was a question if I was the only girl in my group. No, there were 3 of us. And actually, there were 32 people accepted into the group. And after the first year, only 16 returned. And that's how many graduated, basically 3 girls and 13 boys. There was a question why I became an engineer, why technology. And I have a really logical and technical brain. And if you ever worked with me in my marathon classes or just anything, you see how I explain everything and split it in smaller elements and very logical structures. That doesn't come from nowhere. That's me. That's how my brain works. Methodology and structure, it's exactly who I am. And I loved what I studied. I loved what I was doing. No one forced me to. It's not like parents took me to this college and said, okay, that's what you're supposed to study. No, this is exactly what I wanted to do and wanted to be. There was a question about creativity. creativity is everywhere, and especially, you know, it's like if you look at engineers, actually extremely creative people. People I studied when I was at university, people I studied with in engineering, they're very creative people, and lots of them were in theater or became some, you know, people on TV. I mean, it's the creativity was, you know, in everything. We participated in everything. So engineering, I think, is just one of the outlets for creativity. So if you've seen, for example, when I was drawing cars and stuff, I love this. It's exactly who I am. It kind of explains who I am, and it's a combination of all these different outlets of creativity: engineering, art, music. It's all important. It's all combined creates personality. So if you look at stuff that I draw, I mean, it's you know, cars because I understand them, or cityscapes because I was doing lots of drafting by hand for 3 years while I was in college. So when hundreds of people graduate every year from art colleges, but if you have something else that you can combine it with, it creates a richer, you know, person. So at the end of my engineering career, I was in charge of a project of a Volvo transmission for big truck, Volvo trucks. And I had to travel a lot and work with different companies and different people who worked on big projects, understand how involved it is. And that load was a bit too much. I was pretty much burning up at the job. I worked about 12 hours a day. So that's really ate into my life. So when I decided to leave, I realized that I have 2 months of unused vacation, and I want to leave and work and have no life. Somebody commented that now there is no drawing by hand anymore in colleges. Well, my nephew was studying 4 years after me, and still there were 2 semesters of actual, you know, drafting. So you do learn. I mean, your hand gets used to. It's very important. You study perspective. You learn, you know, your hands become strong and you acquire certain gestures. It's all affects how you know, your ability to draw in the future. Somebody asked what the paintings are behind me. Well, one is a poster from IKEA, and I usually have a couple of 2 or 3 of my paintings, but I don't like more than that on my walls. While working as an engineer, I started doing some ceramic work, flowers, and some things like that. It was really interesting for me. It required, you know, kind of delicate handwork, and that's what I enjoy. I forgot to kind of define and explain why I left orchestra. When I was in college, I graduated with 2 diplomas. Second diploma was in technical translation, and basically from morning till 4 I was studying on one, and from 6 to 9 studying another, and it took all my time and it affected everything else I do. There was not much time left. There was a question about kind of what fills my life right now. Well, I live, well, by drawing, and right now I have a big project, big format paintings, and they're behind me, and that's what kind of fulfills me right now. While doing flower ceramics, I noticed that there is such thing as jewelry production, and it really attracted me, and that's what I started learning on my own. And at some point I realized that I kind of achieved what I wanted to achieve in flower ceramics, and switched to jewelry. So for the last 7 or 8 years I'm doing jewelry in parallel with art, and that's but I studied it all on my own. So yeah, to go back to when and why I quit engineering, you know, I was really burning up the job, and thank you to one great person who was an artist also and working as an engineer. And one day he came to my office and he saw a painting that was hanging there on the wall. It was my painting, and no one even registered that it's mine. And it was sort of hanging there as a reminder that I'm an artist too. And he asked me, he said, "This is your work, right?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, when God gives you talent or abilities, it's not good, not to use it." So about a year later, I finally quit my job, and I realized that, I guess subconsciously I always wanted to be an artist. And in reality, if I could combine both, I would, but it's just simply impossible. So I resigned, and I didn't have anything else. And I had my jewelry business, some commissions, but nothing major, nothing else to support me. Somebody asked if it was not scary to leave stable job, and to tell you the truth, I was so exhausted that I would have paid them to let me go, because they actually didn't want to let me go. And in terms of stability, it's all fictional. I mean, there's no stability per se. No one guarantees you anything anywhere, so it's all up to you. So after working 12-hour days with no weekends for 2 years, and I decided that I'm not going to work for anyone. I might work with someone, but I'll be my own boss. Somebody asked how I, it's like made it, became brave enough to do this, to just leave a job. And for me, it's kind of, I decide and I act on it. It seems like every 3 or 4 years I make major decisions that changes my life. And when I decide that this is the right way, I act on it, and that's what I do. So I left my job in the beginning of January, about 5 years ago. And it was interesting. So in March of that year, I was invited to teach jewelry art in Slovenia. So at that event in Slovenia, I've met so many artists and creative people, and from like 20 to 60-year-old, and I've noticed how excited they are, how the eyes are burning with interest and fascination, and how my eyes are dull, from exhaustion. And I decided that that's what I want to do. The question was, when I started jewelry, learning jewelry and the watercolor, if I studied, if I took some classes, master classes, or studied using books. I used both, but I just, in terms of watercolor, I took a couple of free webinar classes from Veronika Kalachova's school. But just to reiterate, I never took live classes. It just didn't work out for me. In my opinion, I don't have talent for art. I have talent for self-learning. It works for me the best. If I have any abilities, it's this: I can learn very efficiently by myself. For example, when I was learning to ice skate, I was just watching and watching very intently, and then just got on skates and started skating, and I wasn't falling. Or when I started doing mountain climbing, I was just observing and watching, and then I started doing these difficult moves because that's kind of, I'm a very visual person, and that's how I understand things. I need to observe, and then I get it. The same with observing artists. I just watch how they do it, and I get it. I receive the information. But of course, practice. I worked really hard. I worked a lot. I used books for anatomy, it's like but mainly it's all just practice. From books, I also picked up, colors, combinations, reflections, but perspective, for example, and that's all came from engineering, because I was learning perspective and isometry, and that gave me a kind of a leg up on that information. There was a question how people, other artists respond to self-taught artists. Well, I think it's has less to do with if you're self-taught or not, because I met so many famous artists and lots of them didn't have degree in art. Maybe they were studying with another artist, took some workshops and stuff, but it wasn't their specific education. If you listen to lots of artists, I mean, they never hide that they are like engineers or doctors, and that they self-taught. It's never an issue. The reason I'm telling you my story is because I want to re-emphasize that mainly it's your will and determination and hard work, and then everything's possible. I never was just sitting and staring and waiting for something, great to happen to me. I have, was getting 2 degrees at the same time, working very hard. And after that, I worked, at my job without weekends and 12 hours a day. And after I stopped and I wanted to become, and I remembered that I actually love watercolor and can paint, I was learning and working extremely hard. So I never would just sit, or do nothing on a weekend. And that hard work paid off, because even less than a year after I started like studying watercolor really hard, I was invited to teach classes. But of course you can't say that, I just studied for a year. Of course, first of all, I was drawing all my life, and especially last 10 years, especially when I was in college, I was drawing with pencil, and I was doing lots of portrait commissions because it gave me a chance to make some extra money for, some necessities that I needed, like phone, whatever, and some other stuff like that. And of course, all of this affected, it's like gave me, hand that I can rely on, it's like I can draw, I can understand. And so most of my life I was drawing. It's not happened in 1 year. But talking about seriously drawing, I've been drawing painting since 2006, so it's been 14 years. And watercolor, yes, I've been doing it for the last 5. So far it's never affected my career, that I'm self-taught artist. I already was telling a story about exhibitions and, prizes, and I have so many very famous artists who are my friends, and I'm really proud to have them as my friends. Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you want to learn something from somebody, you need to respect that artist's art. It needs to talk to you. And of course, when I got friends, artists whose art I respected, I was asking advice and sending them my work. And if I didn't understand something, I would, respect what they would suggest. So back to my life story, sort of. So from the time I started teaching in Moscow and started giving tours, I moved to Moscow. Somebody was asking where they can see my jewelry pieces. In my profile, there is a separate portion of it that shows all my jewelry work. There are some interesting pieces there that I don't do anymore. Mainly, I just do work on commission, and it's that palette for the artists. Another question is, how did I come up with my own style in watercolor? Well, I always listened to myself, I never follow anyone. It just what speaks to me, that's what I try to. I guess since I always, quite a few times in my life, I had to make kind of strong, decisions, hard decisions. So, and I never put responsibility on those decisions to someone else. I was always responsible for my life. And at 6 years old, I decided to go to study music and was in orchestra, and then, go to Bauman instead of more convenient college and study engineering, and then, decided to stop my career as an engineer and become an artist or study jewelry. I mean, all this, kind of speaks for itself. When I decide something, it feels right. That's what I follow. Same with my palette and my colors. So of course I picked up some technical, styles and stuff from different people, but I've been always painting the way I felt that should be done. So that's how style came up. Somebody is asking how I deal with self-criticism. There is always self-criticism, but I deal with it that I just do new painting, because there is always something that you like and something that you're not quite happy with and it needs to be improved. So you just kind of analyze it and move on and do next one. I strongly believe that all this self-criticism and self-doubt comes out from when we have too much time on our hands. If we work hard and if we can, then there is a progress and we just move on and we stop, kind of self-analyzing. When you have one painting in 2 or 3 weeks, of course you have plenty of time to just sit and kind of self-analyze and self-criticize and, be riddled by doubts. But if you just work, you move on to the next painting, it's new painting, it's new challenges, it's progress. You don't have time to just kind of dwell on what didn't work out in this particular one. I don't follow any particular artist. I mean, there are artists that I really like, I admire, for example, like Sargent or Zvukovic, and quite a few other artists. You can look in my Instagram account and see who I follow. But there is no one who okay, I would like to be like this artist. No. Somebody had a question about my jewelry work and how I learned to do it. If I studied with somebody or videos and books. Yes, I did videos and books. I never studied with somebody specifically. There was a question how much time it takes to paint one painting. Actually, before this lockdown, it took me maximum maybe 5.5 hours, but now since I paint this larger sizes, 1.5 meters by one, so it takes about around 10 hours. Someone's asking how I decided which technique to use, like my watercolor. It's the same like with Domra, it's like something that I felt instantly connection with. It was same with Domra or watercolor. I'm overall just the type of a person that I make my decisions really fast. If I like something, if I see something and I want to buy it, I just buy it. I'm not gonna walk around looking for different variations on the thing. Same, it's like with people. If I connect with someone, I trust myself. I trust my decisions, so I make them pretty fast and stick with it. I used a variety of techniques and materials before I started painting in watercolor. I used oils and pastels, and pretty much an acrylic, so pretty much anything that's available. But when I got to watercolor, especially modern materials of watercolor, when you can do it, it's not just like drafting and washes, you can actually paint with it. It became my love and I stuck with it. I understood that this is what I need. At some point my mom asked me, art is, it's very creative, and how do you use your engineering education? But if you look at art, it's chemistry and physics, because you need to understand materials and paper and timing, and math is needed, to calculate how long will the drying time take, and the mixing of different materials and the sediment of paints, and so it takes all my skills. My education is extremely useful. I'm just telling you today my story so you understand. Of course, I also have ups and downs and doubts, but the main part is not to give in. The main thing is just to keep on going, keep on doing stuff. The question was, how fast did I get to the level in watercolor that I'm satisfied with? I haven't. I'm still learning, I'm still progressing. And what are we talking about, results, satisfaction? It's like if I can hang it on a wall, I've been doing it for a longest time. If clients will like it, or if I will like it, or it deserves to be on a competition level enough to teach. I mean, there are all these different parameters, and for example, if it's for the public, you can never guess. Some people might like it, some not. If it's for me, never going to be completely satisfied. I'm always going to hopefully be improving and learning and moving forward. The next question was, how did I come up with self-discipline and train myself to be the way I am? I can't really answer to that question because I think I was born this way. That's something that was given to me. For example, if you look at my attendance record while I was in college, basically I missed majority of it. I missed as much as people who were thrown out. But because I had so many other activities that I needed to take care of, like music and KVN and theater. But when it was time for me to study and get ready to take exams, I would sit down and study and work really hard and just go and pass the exam. So I always was responsible, and I always understood that I need it, so I need to put an effort and to achieve it. And I was a good student, so college, bosses were sort of lenient because they knew that I'm doing all this other stuff, and I was a good student. So as long as I studied well, they gave me option to do it. The question was, how long does it take me to come up with an idea or decide to develop certain idea? And it varies a lot, from like 2 minutes to a couple of years, really. There is a question of what is it that I'm studying right now. Well, first of all, I took 2 courses of modern art, and in terms of personal art right now, because I'm painting with paper stretched on frames, so I wet it only from one side, but I'm figuring out how to create effect as if it was wetted from both sides. Basically, I'm painting wet on dry, and the effect I want to create is painting wet and wet. And plus, I'm learning French. Somebody asked if I ever had breaks during, while I'm painting, if I ever happens that I don't paint for a while, that I just don't even pick up a brush. Yeah, it's like with everyone else. Sometimes it happens that a week or 2 I just don't feel like painting, so I don't really force myself. So it happens nowadays, but it wasn't always like that. When I started, like, people who were following my Instagram account will, would have noticed that I would, for 2 years, I was posting new painting every day. So basically, I was trying to painting a day for 2 years. And it really gave me a big jump in what I could accomplish. Talking about being satisfied with, your creative work, actually, I realized, being in this lockdown, I realized that during last year, I was teaching a lot and had very little time for my personal improvement of my art. And so I made a decision that, I'm going to definitely teach less and spend more time to kind of moving my art forward. There was a question like, what books do I use to study? In the recent, lately, no, I haven't been using any books. For example, modern art, I was studying online. And in terms of before, like when I was studying anatomy, for example, I used books of like 1970s. The older books, the better, because they have less fluff and more actual information. It's harder, but it's very useful. But I want to reiterate, like, even if you study everything and you learn everything about anatomy from the books, but if you don't use it in practice, it's going to be useless information. because there are so many doctors, they know anatomy really well, but can they draw? No. So it all has to be reiterated in practice. I mean, applied to practice. Actually, the best way is just to actually start doing something, and when you come up with questions, go to the books and resolve those find answers to those questions. There was a question about if I can help someone who doesn't have some, discipline, self-discipline. Yes, actually, I do have a suggestion because especially during this lockdown, like look at all those books. I write lists of things that I need to accomplish. I put goals and I see practically everything is crossed out. And I have books and books and books of this. I mean, that's how I structure my life and how I accomplish things. Structuring what I do actually came from being a project lead. It really taught me how to schedule and structure so the project will be successful, because you can't look forward like, oh, in 2 months I'm going to do this, and in 2 months, 3 months I'm going to do that, and then by the end it's all going to come out and I'm going to accomplish my goal. No, that goal is going to be moving target. You're never going to reach it. What you really need to do is to decide, for example, that in a year from now I'm going to have, let's say, personal exhibition. So you put that on a calendar and then you start counting backwards. What is it that you need to accomplish to achieve that goal? And it's buying art supplies, how long it's going to take to ship them, how many paintings you're going to do, if you need frames, if you depend on other people to come up with other elements. It's all affects, and then at the end you might come up that with the understanding that you probably should have started 3 months ago. And of course, I mean, it's in your hands. You can always move final target goal, but creating those milestones is extremely helpful, and that's how you actually get to achieve things. In general, to kind of motivate yourself, to stimulate yourself in terms of being productive and not to procrastinate, it's very important to create goals. But goals need to be really manageable, and goals need to be well, I mean, you put a big goal, for example, if we want to participate in an international exhibition. And so what does it require? I mean, if you just put it on paper, it's kind of unexplainable task. But if you break it up in small milestones, like what does it involve? You need to come up with a theme, you need to find references, you need to have art supplies, you need to do sketches, to finalize the idea, and then you need to paint it. And those milestones really motivate you to move and to create things, and that's how you move forward. The main idea of planning is to come up with the goal and then to break it up into small manageable pieces, because when you see big goal, it's really hard to approach it. You just sit and stare at it. But when you break it up in small manageable pieces, achievable little goals, then you actually will be able to accomplish it. There is a question about if I use photo references and if I take them from the internet. No, I just maybe most of the references I use are my own, and maybe I use 1% of references from my friends. But it's really important to understand what is it that you're painting, what you're looking at. I mean, you put your soul into it, and you can't get it if you're just taking someone else's reference. Of course, emotions sometimes affect how we work and what we do. I mean, I'm a creative person, so it all goes through me, through my emotions, and of course, when I work a lot, it usually all kind of dampens into my creativity. But sometimes you do get tired, you burn out, it affects you. When I do get to the point of burning out emotionally, I have a plan. Sort of, I open up a book where I wrote down certain things that kind of tells me, okay, you need to go for a walk, you need to go for a run, or best of all is to write down a plan. Because when I plan, when I structure what is it that I'm going to do, it helps me to get over that particular critical period. There was a question if I ever take a break, if I ever relax. And yes, I do. When I switch, what is it that I do? That's my particular thing. Because the worst thing for me, if somebody tells me, okay, relax, sit down, watch TV, this is the worst thing. I can't relax this way. I need to just switch activities and then I can relax. The only time relaxation for me, when I just don't do anything, is sort of stare into nothing, is when I'm on tour, because it's 6-7 days intense with lots of people and looking at lots of paintings and helping and working, and then I get exhausted just from all this input. And when I go to my room, I just pretty much sit down and stare into the wall and meditate, and that's the only time when I relax while doing nothing. There was an interesting question if I paint from nature, and 99% of my work is from nature. It's plein air and from whatever the real stuff that I'm seeing. I mean, it's only in the studio when I paint from. It's a studio work and paint from photo references, but all other work is from nature. Working from nature, it helps you develop a lot faster and a lot more. And if people are interested, I can, maybe next Thursday, I can do a program about plein air, painting from nature, and why is it so important. The question was, how do I respond to people copying my work? In reality, I really don't care. I have tons of ideas, they're mine. And if people copying my work for to study, to learn, that's great. But if they copy the work just because, I feel sorry for them, because I have millions of ideas and they don't. So I don't want to waste my time, following those people and writing angry letters. It just doesn't help anyone and just waste of my time. There was a question if I watch movies and such. Yes, I do. I love watching movies, and especially when I'm doing some jewelry work, it's mainly impacts on my hands and not on my mind. And I can watch movies while I'm doing that. And there was another question about sports, if I do any sports. And yes, I do a lot. I run and I do mountain climbing. People asking about personal life, if there is time for personal life. Yes, I mean, everything needs to be in balance, because it all affects each other. If something's inadequate or not enough, it affects your other areas of your life. So it all should be in balance. Somebody asked me if it's possible for me to stop doing what I'm doing right now and do something else. And yes, I don't reject anything. I mean, I'm a creative person, and my creativity can take different forms and shapes, and it is what it is. There was a question about if it's possible to support yourself just being an artist. And yes, I mean, that's what I'm doing. It's very important for me to support myself and not rely on anyone else. And that's a kind of concept of my life. The way the artist can support themselves is teaching, selling their paintings, and commissions. I don't do commissions, but I do teach and I do sell my artwork. The question was how soon I started thinking about making money on art when I started painting in watercolor. Basically from the start. That's my idea to support myself, and I have this business streak, I guess, in my personality, and I always come up with projects for myself, for my friends that can be monetized, and that's how I lead. I always paint and do art-wise what I feel, what I want to do. But when I just started, for example, I was taking any small commissions, any small projects, till I got to the point where I could take larger stuff and more important projects. The question was if I ever studied marketing. Yes, I did study marketing, I study psychology. It's all important, it's all part of being an artist and being able to support yourself. I approach art as I used to approach projects that I was in charge of, because you really need to understand different parts of marketing and law and individual, elements, how they work together. And there is no difference between running a large project and running yourself as an artist. It's just a big project. So the only thing I never monetized is downhill skiing and music. So that's sort of my hobby. But all other stuff I respect and I treat it as a big project. Production of art is a project, and you really need to either understand all the parts of that project or being able to delegate some of it to people who actually know and can help you. As I mentioned before, the only thing that I don't do, people were asking if I work on commission. I don't. The reason is I just don't want to. I don't enjoy that process because somebody is in charge, like somebody saying, oh, paint me so I look beautiful, but understanding what beautiful is totally different. I can't get into that person's head and see how he or she sees themselves. And it's I had the experience I had was very unfortunate, and I really don't want to do it. It has to be something very, very special, or I really want to do it a lot for some reason, that particular case. Other than that, I just I don't feel comfortable doing it. There was an interesting question of how soon I started getting a larger projects after I started painting in watercolor, and the answer is a year. After a year. Why? Well, I'm not going to be apologetic about it, because it seems like that's temp of my life. I work extremely, I'm very productive. I work a lot, produce lots of work, and it's sort of like, 3 years in one, because I have thousands of paintings. Even recently, I was like destroying about 200 of them because I just didn't think that they're good enough anymore, and I didn't want them to be representative of what is it that I do. There was a question if people do buy portraiture, or if they buy more of still life or landscapes and stuff. Yes, I don't paint portraits as such, but my figurative work does sell. So yes. Also, there was a question if I do buy paintings of other artists, and yes, I do, but there exists such a thing as exchanging paintings between artists. When we meet, we, gift each other paintings. So I already have pretty, good collection of other people's work that I really admire.
Писал мне. Вот. Это работа Мелинд Мулик. Тоже. Это, кстати, Алекс Хилкурц. Алекс, this is your painting. Так, Амит Капур, директор ИВС Индии, замдиректор ИВС. То есть, в принципе, Лена Дзюба, прекрасный акварелист. Грузия моя любимая, связанная с ней. Эту работу я приобрела. Это Нина Орлова. Мне просто очень протея нравится. Я думаю, знаете, Николас Лопес. У меня в коллекции тоже есть вот такая с Римом работа. Сергей Лысый. Вот. Так что это просто...
Somebody commented that I shouldn't be destroying my work. It's better to give it to someone. No, I do not agree with it. It's my work. I'm an artist. First of all, I have full right to do what I want with it. Second of all, if I get a present that I don't like, I'm not going to give it to someone else. I need to like something to gift it. The same with my work, especially. I need to like it. Otherwise, it should not really exist and represent me as an artist. I have very fulfilling life. I mean, I do lots of things besides art. I mean, art definitely is main thing, but I do lots of sport and I study and I have personal life like any 30-year-old woman, and nothing takes priority over something else. I try to keep it all in balance, and I don't have time to maybe sit and go through internet, or stare into nothing. But I do have enough time for everything that I like to do. There was a question if I prefer any time of day to work. Actually, no, it varies depending on season, lighting, the natural light, and sometimes I can work till 5 or 6 in the morning and then sleep till 12, or sometimes I work till 12 or 1 and get up at 10. So it all varies. There is no particular structure. It's all, any time of day really feels comfortable if I in the mood. There was a question of how to become a famous artist. Well, I can't tell you that, but how to be an artist who can support themselves, that's basically you just need to draw a lot, participate in exhibitions and competitions, and again, draw and draw and draw and paint. So there was a question if I'm thinking if it's possible for me to move to another place. And actually, yes, I'm planning on moving because I really don't like Moscow. There was a question if I want to try different materials. I actually did try a variety of different materials, oil and acrylic, and watercolor is just more spontaneous. It's more dynamic, and it fits my personality. So I never say never, but that's what fits me. That's what I want to improve on. That's what I want to work with. There was a question of how soon did I come up with my palette of my colors, and in reality, it took just half a year if I started painting in watercolor, because I'm a more graphical artist, so I don't need that many colors. Maybe soon I'll be painting black and white like Nicholas, who knows? But it just I wasn't using as a color, so palette kind of just realized itself. So this is basically it. I think I kind of covered how I came to be a watercolor artist, and that's the story as it is so far. Just wanted to emphasize one more time that basically I didn't have a fairy tale story. I just worked extremely hard, and there was stress and still is, and problems and that I had to overcome, and just working very hard, and I hopefully you and we can accomplish what we want to accomplish. One of the last questions is about how I came to paint in large format watercolor paintings, and probably I'll have to do a separate program about it. It deserves it. It's interesting. I can show you close-ups and details and talk about it more. That's it. There was a question of how not to be afraid, especially when you're a beginner, of the white page, empty paper, and how to not to compare yourself to professionals. And basically, it's crucial to understand that professional people put in lots of work and lots of years. Nothing happened in vacuum. No one is just opened up and started and they just in creating magical work. Even people who have gifts from God, and if they don't work enough, it goes away. They can't achieve the top of the skill. And some people who just average, but they work a lot, they actually can become successful artists. So it's very important not compare yourself to anything and anyone, and just believe in yourself. It's crucial for success. So the last words it's again, just paint more. Don't compare yourself to anyone else. You never know what your road is going to be. And if you work hard, it'll bring results.